Yes, a very good morning to you. It's Wednesday, the 7th of October, 2020. Welcome back to the best On Ground Weekday Kickoff. My name is Pete Fairbairn, and as always, I'm joined by one of the country's top sports media personalities to talk me through all of the big stories making waves in the world of Aussie sport today. Natalie Yoannidis down in Melbourne. How are you, Nat?
Yeah, I'm good, Pete. Thanks for having me again.
Fantastic to have you back on the show, and we are going to talk about AFL, NRL, and also just a bit more broadly about the glut of sport that we're being treated to at the moment. But we're going to start this morning in rugby union and ahead of the first Bledisloe Cup match in Wellington this Sunday. Lovely piece from worldrugby.com looking at Wallaby captain Michael Hooper ahead of his 100th Test match this coming weekend. He's been a fantastic servant of the game for the Wallabies and for the New South Wales Waratahs. Michael Hooper, obviously a very young captain early on in his tenure, and a guy who I guess hasn't been able to take the Wallabies to the ultimate success yet. He's had his detractors along the way, and his body shape and the style of player that he is for a seven, meant that there was a lot of debate over many years as to whether he or David Pocock should be wearing that gold 7 jersey. But I think it speaks to the quality of him as a player and as a man and a leader that in David Pocock, who was a generational talent, Australian rugby found a solution by moving him to a different position. Now, you've worked really closely in rugby and with Michael Hooper, you would have got to know him over the years. Talk me through the man, the player, and just what an amazing achievement it is to be the second youngest player in history to reach 100 Test caps for any country and just the 12th Australian to reach the mark.
Yeah, I think that you've really nailed it quite a lot there, Pete. Of course, Michael Hooper, I followed his career really, really closely, not just with the Waratahs, but also with the Wallabies. And he has been, in a lot of ways, a bit of a polarising number 7, not so much captain. I think that everyone has always agreed that Michael Hooper's been the best man to captain the Wallabies. But as a number 7, he's been a little bit polarising. Of course, David Pocock, as you mentioned, was there. And then we had that 8 and 7 combination with those two from about 2015 onwards. But also just whether or not he should be playing 7 at all, whether he should be perhaps more of a winger or something like that. So he's been a little bit polarising, but you cannot underestimate the impact that Michael Hooper's had on this side and just how important he's been to Australian rugby. He's pretty much been the only mainstay in that Wallabies side since 2013, and for him to be named captain, I think it was around 23 or 22, is just a testament to the player that he is and just how important he has been to Australian rugby and really helping bring that team together, because at times it has been a divided team, particularly when we saw that Israel Folau situation a couple of years ago. The Wallabies were incredibly divided, particularly going into that World Cup. So he's been so important, and you can't underestimate his value both on and off the field.
Yeah, his teammates have loved playing alongside him. I mean, you reference, that he could even play on the wing. This is a forward with the skill set of a back. His catch pass, his ability to read the game through the eyes of a back is pretty unrivaled. And his work rate, his defence, he's the highest scoring Wallaby forward of all time, so he doesn't mind sniffing out a try when the opportunity comes as well. He's been a fantastic servant to Australian rugby, and he's not the flashiest of guys. He doesn't have really any social media profile. He doesn't go looking for the headlines. He got married really quietly during the COVID, during the pandemic. In the heart of that, he and his longtime partner settled down and got married really, really quietly. There was no magazine deal there, but he has been a wonderful servant to the game. And gee, you'd love to see him appreciate or enjoy some Bledisloe Cup or even World Cup success, wouldn't you, Nat?
Oh, absolutely. It's one of those things, isn't it? I think Matt Tamua came out during the week saying that they would prefer to win a Bledisloe over a World Cup. And given how long it has been since they've won a Bledisloe, can kind of understand where they're coming from, because there's such a rivalry there with the Kiwis. And Michael Hooper is one of the most passionate players you'll meet. Speaking to him straight after games, he tells you exactly how he sees it. He doesn't sugarcoat things, and he just bleeds for the Wallabies and bleeds for the Waratahs as well. So you can understand just how badly he'll want to win a Bledisloe, having been through so much pain over the last few years. So it would be fantastic to see him finally get a Bledisloe, as it would be for the Wallabies in general, because it's been such a long time coming for them.
Yeah, and of course the task, a pretty tough start this weekend in Wellington, Australia. Hasn't won, well, I have to check in Wellington off the top of my head, but certainly haven't won in Auckland, next week's location, since 1986, and no member of this current Wallabies side was born when that happened. But it's an exciting new era for the Wallabies, and hopefully Michael Hooper can be at the forefront. And he's going to be challenged by the Fraser McWrights and Liam Wrights of this world. He's going to have a lot of pressure on his position in coming years as well, and I think that's a good thing for Michael Hooper and Australian rugby. Our second story this morning, we turn to a story in The Age from Jake Nile, Daniel Cherney and Michael Gleeson, and it's the confirmation that Essendon's line-breaking defender Adam Saad has told the Bombers he wishes to be traded to Carlton. Carlton have confirmed that Saad wants to cross over and that they've offered him a 5-year deal. It's believed that Essendon offered Saad a 4-year deal on close to $600,000 a year. However, it's kind of footballing and culture reasons why Adam Saad is looking to join his third different AFL club, having, of course, started his career at the Gold Coast Suns and returned to Victoria with the Bombers 3 years ago. How big a loss is Adam Saad going to be for Essendon, Nat? And what does this mean for the future of the likes of Joe Danaher and Orazio Fantasia?
You can't underestimate how big a loss this is for Essendon, Pete. He's probably one of their top 3 players at the moment. He's so important to that defence, particularly with the likes of Cale Hooker and Michael Hurley getting older, and Connor McKenna, of course, going home. He played a similar role to Adam Saad this season. This is a huge loss for Essendon, of course, from a playing perspective, but also it says so much about where the club is at. You mentioned a couple of other players who are sort of looking at leaving, whether Joe Danaher does decide to leave. Orazio Fantasia it looks like he wants to go back to Adelaide. So it's a little bit concerning that there are so many Essendon players that are looking to get out. This is a club that should certainly be challenging, if not for finals, then for, top 4, even grand final opportunities. And all of a sudden, it looks like they're about to go through a rebuild, which as an Essendon fan is absolutely devastating when you consider what they've been through over the last few years. It's a proud club. It's always been a strong club, but at the moment it's a complete rabble. And it's very concerning when you hear Adam Saad talk about things like culture. Of course, they had a few issues with some of the players weren't happy that Tom Bell-Chambers didn't get a going away game or a farewell game in that last match against Melbourne, which probably would have been suitable given they weren't going to make finals and he had been such a servant of the club. So there does seem to be a few issues there, and the fact that they've already got their new coach, they're not looking for a new coach, and they've had this very confusing succession plan this year doesn't really fill Essendon fans with a lot of hope.
Yeah, tough situation for Essendon fans at the moment. And the Bell-Chambers situation, I mean, without trying to make a mountain out of a molehill, it's got similarities to the detrimental effects we've seen of other clubs farewelling players too soon, perhaps. Not suggesting that Bell-Chambers should have kept playing on at Essendon, but we saw, for example, at Melbourne when James McDonald was pushed out under a new coach kind of before he was finished, and the detrimental effect that had on that football club's list and their culture. And Bell-Chambers, you can't help but wonder whether not giving him that final game might have a similar effect on the Bombers. I certainly hope that's not the case for yourself and the other Essendon fans. Our second AFL story this morning comes from afl.com.au from Mitch Cleary, and he's looking at the situation with St Kilda's Ben Long, who will take his one-match suspension to the AFL Appeals Board tonight in a final last-ditch attempt to be cleared to play in that finals match against Richmond at Metricon Stadium on Friday night. St Kilda will already be without Paddy Ryder, who was probably close to, if not best on ground against the Bulldogs on Saturday afternoon. He's done a hamstring, and what a shame for him in the first finals match he'd ever won. He won't be able to play on Friday evening. They'll also be without Jake Carlisle. Carlisle returning to Victoria to be with the birth of his third child. So that leaves them already down ruck support and a key defender, and probably see the likes of Dylan Roberton and Jonathan Marsh potentially come into the conversation to replace them. But Ben Long, if he were to miss out as well, that's another huge out, and that really would, by taking 3 key players out of St Kilda's 22, heading into a match in which they're already the underdogs against a Richmond team determined to hit back from a disappointing showing last week. Things are looking pretty tough for the Saints from here, aren't they, Nat?
Yeah, you'd have to say so. I don't know what their odds are for this game against Richmond, but I can't imagine they're great, because even with those 3 players in there, they were probably going to struggle, given Richmond, the defending champions, coming off a loss against Brisbane, might probably get Tom Lynch back into that side, which is going to really give them a boost up forward. So it was always going to be a tough task for the Saints anyway. To be perfectly honest, I think they could probably cover the loss of Jake Carlisle. It was only a couple of weeks ago that he was dropped and wasn't even playing in the side, so they can probably cover that loss. Paddy Ryder is the huge out for them, of course, with that hamstring injury, and you just saw just how passionate he was when he did do that injury in the last 60 seconds of that game. He knew it was bad, and it's not looking great for Paddy, whether or not he needs surgery or not. But that's the big loss for them. I don't think that Ben Long will get off at the tribunal. Stranger things have happened, of course. The appeals have always been a little bit touch and go, because they are different to the tribunal hearing, the tribunal panel. So it's going to be interesting to see exactly what happens there. But even if Ben Long does get off, I think it's going to be a real uphill battle for the Saints. They are going to have to play their best game of the season. And this is a team that's beaten Richmond, of course. They've beaten Port Adelaide, they've beaten Richmond, so they know what it takes to beat one of these sides. But given how much Richmond have to play for in this game, I think it's going to be very, very tough to get past the premiers, or the defending premiers.
Yeah, and it's when you see, just the impact that these 3 key outs would have for St Kilda, it just brings into really sharp focus the incredible depth at the Richmond Footy Club, and the fact that every year they seem to fare well 2, 3, 4, 5, good players who featured relatively prominently in the year prior. And, we've seen the likes of a Brandon Ellis and, a Jacob Townsend and Anthony Miles in recent years. These types of players go elsewhere. Yet they've just got a bit of a next man up mentality. And it's the same again with the likes of Oleg Markov, Nathan Broad, even Jack Higgins potentially going to be looking for new homes. But if Richmond were farewelling 3 players, or were having to leave out 3 players, you wouldn't imagine it would weaken their lineup that much. And it's just an extraordinary situation how they've managed to do that under the strict regulations of the salary cap. We head to our penultimate story this morning, and it's rugby league, and it comes from friend of the show, Phil Lutton, in the Sydney Morning Herald. Lutz has written a great piece looking at Queensland's state of origin side in comparison to the New South Wales side. I know we're still a few weeks from origin, but we saw newly appointed Queensland coach Wayne Bennett announce some of his first players in a training squad for the Queensland team just yesterday. We've seen New South Wales and Brad Fittler announcing a slow procession of players as well as teams are eliminated from the NRL competition. Lutton says it doesn't seem that long ago that Queensland was so flush with rugby league talent that superstars were falling out of the selectors' back pockets like loose change. And that's because it wasn't. Only a few years back, at the tail end of a dynasty so enduring, it felt to Blues fans like being stuck in a revolving door that yelled Queenslander at you after each rotation. The Maroons still had names like Billy Slater and Jonathan Thurston to come to the rescue. And when the final cut was made at the selection table, players that would walk into the New South Wales side, should they have been born on the other side of the river, were deemed surplus to requirements. Well, how the tides have turned at state of origin time, Nat, because we're looking at a Queensland team that's going to be without David Fifita, without Valentine Holmes. Looks as if fullback Kalen Ponga is going to miss out as well. He's revealed to be facing shoulder surgery, and it means that young Gold Coast Titans star AJ Brimson will probably get his opportunity. There's a whole bunch of young forwards, and Petro Sivanasiva, the former Maroons great, is quoted in the article that being very excited about the likes of a Lindsay Collins and a Moaki Fotuaika coming into that Queensland side into contention. But then you look at the New South Wales team and you see that Cody Walker, probably the informed player of the competition, probably doesn't make the 17. Ryan Pappenhuisen, the most exciting player in the competition, well, he's got to get past a fella named James Tedesco. So extremely unlikely we see him in that New South Wales #1 jersey as well. Is the New South Wales 3 years in a row three-peat a fait accompli, Nat, or do you think Queensland can rustle together a team that's capable of sparking an upset?
I feel like we're talking about the Wallabies and the Bledisloe Cup again, Pete. Look, on paper, it does look like, New South Wales clearly do have the stronger side. Potentially, Wayne Bennett probably needs to do everything in his power to try and convince Cameron Smith to come out of representative retirement to play in this side, because even though he's, edging towards 40, he's still in incredible form. He's still a fantastic player, is Cameron Smith, and probably would be the best player in that Queensland Origin side if he was to play. So that's certainly something I'm sure that the great Wayne Bennett is thinking about, no doubt. But on paper, it does look really, really difficult for Queensland. You mentioned that Brimson will probably come into fullback. I think that's a really exciting appointment. He's probably been playing better than Ponga has been certainly over the last month. We know that Ponga has been carrying a bit of an injury, so that's going to certainly affect his form. But the amount of talent that they've got in that New South Wales side is a little bit terrifying, you'd have to say. Of course, they'll be led by Nathan Cleary in the halves as well, who's really just led the Panthers from strength to strength this year. So it's going to be an uphill battle for Queensland, but it has been a long time that New South Wales have been, really fighting to even compete with the Maroons. So it's an exciting time if you're a Blues fan, you'd have to say.
And with 3 weeks of NRL finals still to go, I'm sure there'll be twists and turns in the tale of availability. And the idea of Origin being played at the end of a final series means that some players will come in a bit banged up, and maybe Queensland's team will be a little bit fresher from that perspective. I dare say that the Ipswich born and raised, I think off the top of my head, born anyway, Luke Keary would have been a nice inclusion in that Queensland team. But of course, he so contentiously declared his allegiances to New South Wales a couple of years ago, and he'll be hoping to make his State of Origin debut. Now, our final story today comes from Will Swanson in The Australian. I'm going to read you the opening paragraph. The Bledisloe Cup, into the NBA Finals, into the French Open Finals, into the Everest, into the Bathurst 1000, into the Super Netball Grand Final, into the Cox Plate, into the NRL Grand Final, into the AFL Grand Final, into UFC 254, into the Melbourne Cup, into the State of Origin, into the Rugby Championship, into the US Masters. Yes, Will Swanson is talking about a perfect storm of big-time sport that is about to hit, with all the postponements and rescheduling and shutdowns and returns of the world's biggest and best leagues and tournaments set to deliver a 4 to 6 week, smorgasbord of sport like we've never seen before. He doesn't even mention Major League Baseball playoffs in the mix there. You've got IPL cricket. It is all happening in the world of sport. And I guess it's the byproduct of the COVID pandemic that we've got all of these competitions looking to make up for postponed and delayed seasons all at the one time. It's fairly unprecedented. How are you going to get around to watching it all, and what are the biggest highlights for you, Nat?
It's party time, Pete. That's what it is. It's actually not a bad time to be locked down. Of course, we're probably going to be locked down for at least another month. So at least we've got something to actually look forward to. Personally, obviously, the Bledisloe Cup is going to be huge. Really looking forward to that kicking off this weekend. The first week of AFL finals were incredible. I don't know if we're going to get the same quality this weekend in the semi-finals, but if the first week is anything to go by, really looking forward to that. Obviously, the NRL finals are still pretty exciting as well. We're all barracking for Melbourne down here, but the Panthers have been incredibly exciting to watch as well. So, geez, where do you even start? To be perfectly honest, we'll probably watch a lot of it, but picking what your favourite is basically like picking a favourite child at the moment. It's so difficult, and I think there's going to be a lot of multi-screen on the TV and a lot of channel changing as well, because this is unprecedented amounts of sport. Particularly you're getting your winter sports into your summer sports. Of course, then you've got your American sports coming in as well. It's not often we see NBA at this time of year, so it's incredibly exciting for everybody, all sports fans around the world.
Yeah, need to, of course, mention the NFL season's up and about. The English Premier League, well, that's been absolutely amazing viewing on Optus Sports so far with some of the upsets there. International football and I think European Championship playoffs this coming weekend as well. So it is a huge time of year. And as Will Swanson says here, bless KO and its split screen option. Well said, Mr. Swanton. Nat, that's all we've got time for this morning. Thanks so much, as always, for coming on the show. Really love catching up, and look forward to catching up with you again soon throughout these final series, and, of course, with the Bledisloe Cup up and about.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Thanks for having me, Pete.
You've been watching and listening to the best On Ground Weekday Kickoff. Really excited to welcome Damien Ratcliffe from The Age tomorrow to talk AFL and a little bit of racing as the Spring Carnival heats up as well. We'll see you then. Cheers.